Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Francisca, and in today's video I'll be showing you how to make a 6 pieces bustier. I'll be doing the half cut, and I'll also be showing you how to turn the half cut into a full 6 pieces bustier with flare. To follow along in this tutorial on how to make this 6 pieces bustier, get your pen and paper ready so that you can sketch out something and follow along while we are drafting. If you are new to my channel, welcome. Please click the subscribe button and click the notification bell beside it so you get updated when I post new videos. And now let's get right into the tutorial. So guys, I have my lines all drawn out: my shoulder, bust line, bust point line, under bust line, and my waistline. If you want to have an understanding of how I drafted these lines, I'm going to link it up in my description box, or you'll see an eye that will pop up above the video. It's on the basic bodice blog, and I show you how to draft these 5 lines. So right at this edge of my pattern paper is going to be my center front, because we are working on the front piece. Do we understand? So the next thing I'm going to do now is to come right here and input my bust span across these 5 lines. And my bust span is also called the nipple to nipple distance, and mine is 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. Now what I'm going to do to that 3.5 is to add an extra ½ inch, and that will make it 4 inches. So I'll come right here, mark 4 inches like this. I just want to mark 3 points. It's going to give us a straight line as well. And then I'm going to join everything up together like this. Do we understand? So guys, the reason why I am marking this nipple to nipple distance right here is because we are going to be cutting this part. We're going to be creating a dart here and cutting it out, and we need to get a bust span or nipple to nipple distance back. So by the time you cut it out and sew by ½ inch, do you understand, I'll be getting my nipple to nipple distance back from the center front of 3.5 inches. Do you understand? Because we're going to cut here and then sew it up back together by ½ inch. So once I'm done with this, once I'm done drawing these lines, I'll come right to my bust point line. I'll be marking ½ inch downwards like this. Come to my under bust, mark my under bust dart of 2 inches, 1 inch on both sides. Come to my waistline, mark my waist dart of 3/4 inches on both sides, making 1.5 inches in total. So I'll come right here across this line, mark 3/4 inches. Then I'll come to my shoulder area. I'll be taking a dart of ½ inch on both sides. So can you see? And then I'm going to join from here now to ½ inch below my bust point line, connect from here to my under bust, connect from my under bust to my waist. Do the same thing for this other side, and I'll be using a curved ruler to do this. So guys, once I'm done connecting, what I'm going to do is to fine-tune this area. We want it to be curved. We don't want it to be pointed. If it's pointed, it's not going to look really nice by the time you cut it out on fabric. So we are going to just curve it out a bit. I hope you understood this part. What I'm going to do now is to come right here and input my shoulder measurements. I'll do it here and here. So my shoulder measurement divided by 2 is 7.5. That's 15 divided by 2. That is 7.5, right? This 7.5 that we are going to mark here, I'll be adding 1 inch allowance to it. And that is because we are going to cut this part into, 2, and then, sew it up by ½ inch. So ½ inch for this side, ½ inch for this side, making a total of 1 inch. So I'll be adding 1 inch to my shoulder measurement, and that will make it 8.5, because my shoulder measurement divided by 2, 7.5, 7.5 plus 1 inch, that is 8.5. Then I'll come right back down here and then mark 8.5 inches. Do we understand? So I'll mark 8.5, and then I'm going to, draw a straight line across like this to have our armhole depth. After this now, I'm going to input my bust circumference, and my bust circumference divided by 4 is 9 inches. So from the center front, I'm going to be marking that 9 inches. So don't worry that my bust circumference is close to the armhole. No, don't worry about that. We are going to be adding this 1 inch that we added here. We'll add it at our bust line, at our under bust, and to our waist, because we are cutting this that out and we're going to join it together like I explained. So I'm going to add that 1 inch allowance, and then for my bust line I'll be adding seam allowance of 1.5 inches. So I'll come right here and mark 1.5 inches. Do we understand that? So I'm going to come to my under bust now, mark my under bust circumference divided by 4 from the center front, and mine is 30. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5, and then the 1 inch allowance for joining this piece together, I'll mark it as well. Then I'm going to be marking the under bust dart that we took care of 2 inches. So I'll come right here, mark 2 inches, and then I'll be adding 1.5 inches of seam allowance. I hope we understood this part for the under bust. Then I'm going to come to my waist now, mark my waist circumference divided by 4, which is 7.5 as well. It's the same thing with my under bust. So I'll mark 7.5 right here, mark my allowance to join these pieces together once I cut it out of 1 inch. So I'll mark 1 inch right here. My dart allowance is 1.5 inches in total. So I'll come right here, mark 1.5 inches, and then I'll be adding my seam allowance of 1.5 inches. So I hope you guys got this right. So now what I'm going to do is to connect from my waist to my bust. Now if you're a beginner at this, you can go on to connect from your waist to your under bust to the bust line. I usually end up with this funny shape. I've realized that once I connect straight from my waist to my bust and then I sew my fabric up, that's when I cut it out on my fabric and sew this little shortage here around my bust, that's from this line here to this point, doesn't really matter for me. So go on to just connect yours like this. By the time you even take your under bust, everything go back into shape. So once all this is done, the next thing I'm going to do now is to come to my armhole line that we have here. And what I'm going to do is to come right here, mark my shoulder slant 1 inch. I'm not going to be connecting anything yet unless I cut this out on fabric. So what I'm going to do now at this point is whatever I have left here, which should be around 8 inches, or it should be exactly 8 inches, I'm going to divide that into 2, giving me 4 inches. For the front part, I'm going to come in by 1/2 inch. And then what I'm going to do is to connect from here to here all the way to this point with a curve. So I'll just connect it like this, and then we have our armhole curve. After carving out the armhole, you can go on to, add the shoulder dart allowance that you took at the top, add it right there after the armhole line, and then just connect it to the armhole curve that, we have drawn out. So you can do this for yours. I didn't do it for mine and my outfit came out okay, but you can go ahead and do that just in case, and that can be trimmed out if you don't need it. Do you understand? So I've added my seam allowance at this point. What I'll just do is add my seam allowance here and then add my seam allowance right at this point as well. Do we understand? So after adding my seam allowances, this is what I have. So I'm going to explain to you how I'm going to cut this out. I'll be cutting this part out like this, following the armhole curve, cut it out like this, come right here to cut out the darts all the way to the top like this, come right here, cut out my darts all the way like this. Do we understand? So guys, after cutting the front part, this is what it is going to look like. Can you see? I did not cut the neckline out. I'm sure I explained that earlier. I didn't cut the neckline out because we want this neckline to come out really well. So we're going to cut it out after we have sewn this part. I did not add seam allowance at the bottom because we are going to be doing the extension for the flare on fabric. So that's why I have this pattern looking like this. What I'm going to do next now is to move to the back piece. So guys, for my back pattern, I marked the same lines that I did for my front. The only difference is that we have a zipper allowance here of 1.5 inches. So can you see that? This is my zipper allowance right here. What I'm going to do now is to go ahead and input my nipple to nipple measurements or bust span from this line that we have here. Do you understand? So I'm going with 4 inches across this line. So I'll just go ahead and mark that. So we are doing exactly what we did for the front pattern. I marked 4 inches so that by the time we cut this and sew it back up to go to my, original bust span or nipple to nipple measurement. So what I'm going to do now is mark my darts, and I'm going with only my waist area. I'm marking darts only at my waist area, and I'm going with a dart allowance of a total of 1 inch, so half an inch on both sides. Then I'll come to my bust point line, mark half an inch upwards. For the front, we went with half an inch downwards. And what I'm going to do next now is to join the darts from here to here, join the points from here to form our darts. Do you understand? So guys, after joining my darts, this is what I have. Then I'll come right to my bust line and input my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 9 inches. So I'll mark 9 inches right here. Then I'll be marking the allowance to join this part together. Once we cut it, the allowance is 1 inch. I'll also input my seam allowance, which is 1.5 inches. Do we understand? Then I'm going to come to my waist now. We are not, doing anything with under bust. So I'll come to my waist from this line right here, mark my waist circumference divided by 4, which is 7.5. Mark the allowance to join this piece together, which is 1 inch. Once we cut it out, so it is 1 inch. My dart allowance here is 1 inch, and then my seam allowance is 1.5 inches. So I'm now going to join from here to here with a straight line. So after joining, this is what I have. Then I'm going to come right at my shoulder now, mark my shoulder measurement divided by 2. Mine is 15. 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. And remember that we're going to cut this piece and join it back together. So that will make me to add, the seam allowance to join this part together, and that is 1 inch. So this will make it a total of what? 8.5 inches. So this 8.5 inches that I've marked here, I'll also come right down at the bust line area, mark that 8.5 inches. Do we understand? Then I'll join this point here to this point here to get a straight line, which will now, become our armhole, line or depth, to become our armhole line. So what I'm going to do now is just mark my 1 inch for shoulder slant here. Whatever I have left, I just divide it into 2, and what I have should be 8 inches. And we're not going in like we did for the front. No, what we're going to do is to connect from here now to this point here with a curve. Now that this is done, I'm going to go on to add my seam allowance here, add my seam allowance at the top as well. So guys, after adding my allowance to my armhole and right at the top, I'm going to go on to cut this out. So this is how I'm going to cut it, like this, like this, like this. Then I'll come right at the dart area and cut it straight up like this. Do you understand? Then I'll come right here, cut this part to the end, cut out my dart like this, and then cut this part out to have, the back piece. Do we understand? We're not going to be, doing a neckline for this part. We're going to cut it out first. So do shoulder slant and then do the neckline. We did not add half an inch at the bottom because we are going to be doing an extension for the flare parts on fabric. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm done cutting the back piece, and this is what I have. So with this pattern, you can cut this directly on your fabric if you want the half cut. Do you understand? I did this on my pattern paper because I'm going to show you how to, do the flare part of this bodice. So right here is the half cut. Now we're going to move this to our fabric to cut, you know, the flare part. So guys, this is the fabric that I'll be using to show you how to cut your 6 pieces bustier with flare running from the waist to the bottom. So I'm starting with the center front. I've placed it on the fabric. The fabric is folded. This folded edge of the fabric will become our center front when we cut it out on fabric. I want the length of my blouse to be 23.5 inches. So I'm going to place my tape rule right at this line here, not at the one on top. Do you understand? I'll place my tape rule right here. Can you see? The one above is seam allowance. And then what I'm going to do is mark 23.5. So instead of me marking it, I'll just leave it like this. So I have 23.5 here, and then I'm adding half an inch for seam allowance, which is what I have right at the bottom. Do you understand? So I'm just going to leave it like this. You are adding seam allowance at the bottom if you are going to, you know, be lining this fabric. Do you understand? So you need to add half an inch seam allowance at the bottom. And if you are going to be doing the half cut where you are going to be attaching a peplum to this, add half an inch at this waist area because we did not add it when drafting this pattern. So now that I've determined the length, this is what I have. So what I'm going to do is measure from this folded part to, you know, this edge right here. And I have 3.25. So can you see? I'll come right at the bottom here. Let me show you guys like this. I'll come right at the bottom here. Place my tape rule at the folded edge. I'm going to be marking 3.25 right here. The reason why I'm marking this is so that we can get our flare, you know, accurately. So I'm just going to draw a straight line down like so. What I'm going to do next is to now determine how much flare I want to add to my bodice. Whatever amount of flare I decide that I'm going to go with, this is the same amount of flare that I'll be adding, you know, throughout all the panels. Do you understand? So from this part now, we'll be adding our flare allowance, and I'm going with 3.5. You can go with more, you can go with less. It depends on what you want. So I'm going with 3.5. I'll come right here and mark 3.5. So did you see that? So I've marked 3.5. Now, we cut this into pieces and they are going to be joined together. This part of the bodice has a half an inch seam allowance already in the pattern. So what I'm going to do is add my own half an inch to the flare allowance. Do you understand? Very, very important. Make sure you add half an inch to your flare allowance. So I'll come right here, add half an inch. Now what I'm going to do is to connect from this point here all the way to this part at my waist here, this edge right here. So I'm going to come like this now. Just create a slight curve at this point and then just connect it all the way like this. Do you understand? So once this is done now, I'm going to go on to cut it out following this line and then following my pattern, cut it out. And this will be our first piece. So guys, after cutting my first front piece, this is what I have. Then I'll go on to the second front piece, and I placed my fabric on fold because we are going to end up with 2 pieces for this part that we are cutting out. So what I did was to place it right on top of my fabric. So from here to here is the length of my blouse plus seam allowance. Do you understand? Exactly what I did for the first piece. Now, right here at this point is where I have, you know, my darts cut out, and that part is supposed to, you know, connect to this part right here. So can you see? It's supposed to connect to this part right here. You need to make sure that you have enough allowance for your flare at this side and at this side. Very, very important when you are folding your fabric. What I'm going to do now is place my tape rule from this edge, can you see, all the way down. Make sure that my tape rule is straight, can you see? And then I'm going to, you know, mark a point here. Very, very important. Come right here. I'm going to do the same thing. Make sure my tape rule is straight and it is right at this edge here. And then I'm going to mark a straight line here. So now from this point, I'm going to input my flare allowance. So for this side where I have my dart, my flare allowance is 3.5. Then we have what? Half an inch, making that a total of 4, like what we did for the front. So I'm going to come right here now, connect from this end, connect it to this point here. So can you see? If you don't want your flare to start from your waist, connect it straight to your underbust. That is, entirely up to you. Now, I'm going to come to this part now. I will mark 3.5 first. If you remember, for our side seam, we added 1.5 inch for seam allowance. So it's very, very important to take note of that when you are, marking your flare allowance, to add that 1.5 inch. So that by the time you are, sewing it together, you'll not be wondering why your flare allowance is kind of like short on the side seam. Do you understand? So since I have 1.5 inch for seam allowance at my side seam area right here, I will add that 1.5 inch after adding my flare allowance of 3.5. So I'll come right here, mark 1.5 inch, and then I'm going to be connecting from here now all the way to this point. So I'll just go on, connect it like this. So you can see that it is very, very simple. Make sure you're having a slight curve going from your waist to, the bottom of your dress. So now that I have this marked, I'm going to go on to cut this out, following these markings that I've made here, and then following my pattern all the way down. I hope you understand this part. So guys, after cutting my second front piece, this is what I have. This second front piece has flare on this side and at the side seam area. So we have it looking like this. So now I'm going to move to the back piece, and we'll be starting with the center back piece, which has our zipper allowance. So I have it on my fabric right here. So can you see? This is what I have. What I'm going to do now is to mark the length from this part here. Another option is to use the front piece as a guide. So I'll just place it right on top of it. So this is another way you can do this instead of measuring and marking. So I'll just place it right on top of it like this and ensure that the top is edge to edge. Then I'll go on to mark the bottom right here. Do you understand? So you can use your front piece as a guide to, marking the back piece. So once this is marked, I'm going to come right here now. I'll be measuring from here to here, and I have 5 inches. So did you see that? I have 5 inches. So this 5 inches now, I'm going to come right down where I marked the bottom. I'll equally mark 5 inches. Do you understand? So it is from this point now that we are going to be inputting our flare allowance. And for this part that has the dart area, can you see this part here, which is connected to the center back? I'm going to be adding 3.5 inches for my flare allowance, and then I'll add half an inch because we're going to, be sewing this part up to the other back piece. And then I'll connect from here to this point here. So I'll just connect it like this. Make sure you have a slight curve at this point. Do you understand? So once this is done, I'll go ahead and cut this out following, the markings that I have here, right here, and then cut the rest out like this following my pattern. Please don't divide it into two. Do you understand? Cut it like this, and all the way to the top. So guys, after cutting the first back piece out, this is what I have. Then I'm going to go on to cut out the second back piece, which has the darts area and also the side seam. This is it on my fabric, and I'll be cutting this out exactly as I did for the front piece that has the dart area as well as the side seam. So what I'm going to do now is to come right here. From here to this edge of the fabric is my length of blouse plus half an inch seam allowance. This should be about 24 inches, or should be exactly 24 inches. So that is what I have right about this point. Now what I'm going to do is to place my tape rule at this edge here, ensure that my tape rule is straight. Can you see? I'm going to mark this point, come right to this other end, ensure that my tape rule is straight as well, and then I mark this point. So can you see? Now at this dart area, my flare allowance that I'm adding is 3.5 inches. So from this point here, I'm going to mark 3.5 inches. So did you see that? Then I'll be adding 1/2 inch at this point, like we did for the front piece, because we're going to be connecting the dart points together. So it will still, you know, take 1/2 inch even at the flare part. Do you understand? And then I'll connect from here now, curve it out from my waist, and then connect it all the way to this point here. I hope we got this right. Now for this part that has the side seam, what we are going to do is mark our flare allowance first, which is 3.5 inches. And then I'm going to come right after this point, mark seam allowance of 1.5 inch. I'm marking 1.5 inch because we have 1.5 inch seam allowance here. So whatever you're taking at the top here will go right into the flare part as well. So go on to mark 1.5 inch, and then I'll connect it with a slight curve from my waist all the way to the bottom here that we just marked. Do you understand? Then I'll go on to cut this out following the markings that I have made like this, and then follow my pattern to, you know, cut out the last back piece. I hope we got this right, this explanation right. So I'll just go on to cut it out now. After cutting out the last back piece, this is what I have. The next thing I'm going to do is to carve out the pieces right at this point. Do you understand? I'm going to carve it out. If you don't carve it out and you go on to sew, by the time you sew, the edge of your flare will be looking pointed like this. Can you see? And you don't like this. It's not going to look nice. You don't want this. So I'm going to show you how to carve this part out. To carve the edge of your flare, what you want to do is at the edge of that flare, you want to come up by 1 inch. So come up from the edge by 1 inch. And you want to go in from the edge by about 3 inches. So what I'm going to do now is to connect from this 3 inch that I've marked right here. I'll just do a slant all the way to that 1 inch. So can you see? Can you see what I did here? And I'm going to trim it off like this. So you want to do something like this. I'll just place the edge of this fabric, this part that I've cut out. So I'll just place it on top like this, and then I'll go on to use this now to trim this part out like this. Do you understand? So whatever I do here, I'll repeat the same thing, you know, for the other pieces to carve out the edge like this. So guys, after carving out all the edges, this is what I have. The parts are double, you know, flared on both sides. I carved it out as well. What I'm going to do next is to join the pieces up together. So I'll be joining, you know, front pieces together, back pieces together. I'll place it on top like this. Then I'll go on to sew this together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the bottom all the way to the top. Then I'll come right here as well and do the same thing. Place it right sides touching and sew from the bottom all the way to the top with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'll do the same thing for the back. I'll place the pieces on top of each other, you know, with right sides touching, and then I'll go on to sew the dart area like this from top all the way down. Do the same thing for this other piece as well, from top all the way down with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After sewing the pieces up together, this is what I have. I sewed it, I made notches, and then I pressed the seam open. For the back, I folded in the zipper allowance and pressed it down. So what we're going to do now is mark our shoulder slant and our neckline. You want to place your back pieces on top of each other. Make sure it is aligned really well. So I'll come right here, mark my shoulder slant of 1 inch. Remember that you have ½ inch seam allowance at this point. So I'm going to, come in by ½ inch. So guys, from this ½ inch that I marked from the armhole area, I'll be marking the part of these bodies that will form our shoulder, and I'm marking 3½ inches. This is inclusive of seam allowance for the neckline. So by the time we sew that ½ inch, my shoulder area will become 3 inches. Do you understand? Now the remaining part from that mark that I have marked right there to my zipper allowance area will form my neckline. Then I'll come right here now. I'll be marking my neck depth of 5 inches. So I have 5 inches right here. Then add ½ inch seam allowance at the top. Do you understand? So we're not going to be connecting this part here. So what I'm going to do now is come right here now and connect from here to this point here. So after connecting our neckline, I'll go on to connect our shoulder slant like this. So did you see that? Then I'll come right here, cut this out and cut this out. Now I have the neckline for the back all cut out. So can you see? This is my neckline. We'll be sewing by ½ inch right here. I'll do the same thing for the front piece. Place the front piece on fold. So can you see what I'm doing? I'll place the front piece like this. Make sure the armhole is aligned really well. Exactly what I did for the back, I'll do for the front, but you can go, deeper for your front neckline. Do you understand? So you need to make sure that the shoulder slant, for the front is the same as the shoulder slant for the back. So I have a total of 4 inches here from the armhole area. You need to make sure that you have a total of 4 inches from your armhole area. So I have 4 inches right here. So I'll mark that. Very, very important. Then I'll come right at the armhole area, mark our 1 inch for our shoulder slant. So after marking our shoulder slant, I'll connect it to this 4 inches that I marked right here. So I'll connect it like this. Then I'll come right here now, mark my neck depth. So I'll be marking 6 inches. I went with 5 inches for the back. I'll be marking 6 inches for the front. So I'll come right here, mark 6 inches. Then I'll add my ½ inch seam allowance at the top, and then I'll connect it to this point right here. And then what I'm going to do now is cut this out like this and like that. So guys, after cutting, you should have your neckline looking like this on the inside. You can see that from the edge here, even across this seam here, is very, very smooth. All the way to this point, very, very smooth. Now, if you decide to cut your neckline before going to join this up, I'm going to show you how your neckline is going to look like. This is how your neckline is going to look like if you decide to, cut your neckline and then join it back. You can see that the edge is not smooth. So instead of you having it to be smooth from the top across the seam here all the way to the other end, you're having like a fold going on here. So that's why it's very, very important that you cut your neckline after you have sewn, not before. Do you understand? So that is what I wanted to explain to you guys. I did this so that you guys can see what exactly I'm trying to, go at. So you don't, make that mistake for yours and cut your neckline before sewing. Do you understand? So make sure that you sew the dark points first before going on to cut your neckline, both for the front and the back. And then you are going to have this smooth finish going on right here. Do you understand? The next thing I'm going to do is to go on to sew the shoulder seams by ½ inch, sew the side seam as well by 1.5 inch because that's what I gave for this pattern that I cut out. Do the same thing for this side as well. Sew the side seam by 1.5 inches, and then I'll show you how this looks on a mannequin. After sewing the pieces together, you would notice that the edge where we have this seam joining the pieces together, the fabric sort of like, just flows into each other. It is not looking pointed. That is why you need to, do that going up by 1 inch, slanting it to the sides by 3 inch to curve it out. So that is what I did for this piece right here, and you can see that the bustier is looking very, very beautiful. In my next tutorial, I'll be showing you how to pad this bustier to let the bust area, come out really well, and also for the flare to, stand out a little bit. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you learned something new today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, turn on the bell so you get updates when I post new videos, and I'll be seeing you in my next video. Bye.